Hi there, welcome to the Building Your Tiny House Dream video tutorial series. I'm Chris, I run a company called Tiny Industrial, and along with the book of the same title, I'll be showing you how to build this exact house. So follow along, I'll be releasing a new video every Wednesday, and hit subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Alright, so in this episode, a rather lengthy one, I'm going to show you how to do the front and back walls and attach everything to the trailer. I've erred on the side of more detail rather than less, so let's get started.
Okay. So this next part is critical. We've got the sides in, well, they're loosely in. We've got the front in, we've got everything stained. Now we're going to do the front, the plywood. So this is pretty key. So if you take a look here, we've got the front in, we've got it set back a little bit so that we can get the plywood in there. And what I did is I just took these two short pieces here to simulate the outcroppings that we're going to do, because these will be instrumental in getting the measurements right. So effectively, we have to measure from all the way down here, because that front ply is going to go into here, into this groove basically. Then we have to measure from the very outer edge to that side, outer edge. That's going to be sort of a rectangle down there. And then once we have that, we're going to make a 90-degree turn. It's drooping a little bit, but imagine that's perfectly flat. We're going to make a 90-degree turn this way for exactly the measurement of this and to here. And then we need to go vertical from there. So this right here we know is 1.5 inches because of the thickness of this board. So that's 1.5 inches. Off of the 11 is 9.5. So basically it should be 9.5 inches from here to here. You know, this is one of those things where you measure 7 times and cut once, because if you screw up these sheets of plywood, you're basically going to screw up 2 sheets, which is $70 worth of plywood. You don't want to do that. That's an expensive mistake. Save those for some other point in the build. Yeah, so that's about it. So what we have to do is figure out exactly what that distance is. And then we have to figure out how high we want to go and at what point we want the arch to be there, right? So that's a whole nother thing, but we'll get to that momentarily. For now, I want to make sure that I get these interior, or these lower rather, dimensions right. We'll sketch those out on the plywood, and then we'll figure out how we're going to do the arc. The arc itself is a little tricky too, since I plan on putting 4x8 sheets of aluminum onto the top of this gypsy wagon. Let's lay out these sheets of plywood so that we can start to imagine what this front piece is going to look like, and then that is going to be mirrored more or less in the back. Okay, so we've laid 2 sheets of 4x8 plywood down. That creates a perfect 8x8 square. Now, the dimensions of the gypsy wagon are not going to be 8x8, so we're going to use some subset of this. This line may or may not be exactly in the middle. What I'll probably do is I'll presume that one of these sides, like this one, will be one side of the gypsy wagon. And then we'll see, you know, where we have to make that cut to come in from the outer edge, and then make that other cut to come down. That's what's next. And this is the thing where you want to spend a little bit of extra time. I remember doing this last time, and it was like a lot of, not erasing, but, you know, Xing out lines and then trying to figure out which were the ones that I was actually going to cut. Yeah, let's get started with this. It's not completely impossible to do, clearly, because I can do it. So therefore, let's start with the dimensions that we talked about for here. We'll draw that out on here, and then we'll take it from there. All right, so this is pretty critical here. We've got 9.5 in from the outer edge from here to where it drops down. So if we assume that this straight edge is over here, this straight edge, we got to come in 9.5. So I made a mark here. That's in 9.5 from the side. Now, from the bottom of the trailer up, I'll show you. From down here to the top edge is exactly a foot. So we've got to come and do, hold on, get back here. We've got to come up a foot. This is great to have. Nice straight lines. So we've got our 9.5 in from the side, 9.5 in. We're gonna come up a foot. Conveniently, this thing is exactly a foot. So there's our vertical cut. This piece right here is gonna sit in that front part of the trailer, and then it's going to crop out, come out from there to the outer edge, which is 9.5. Okay, so let's draw that line as well. And then the whole thing goes vertical. So right here, we already have a corner that we need to cut out. This bottom piece right here is the one that's going to run in the bottom of the front channel of the trailer. And that I've measured to be exactly 59 inches. So we're gonna go from this point where we start to go vertical. We're gonna go over 59 inches, figure out where that is, and then we're gonna mimic this 1 foot up, 9.5 over thing that we did here, and that's gonna form the bottom section of the front driver direction hitch end of the gypsy wagon. That's only half the battle, obviously. Then we have to figure out how high we want the walls to be on the side. I'm probably gonna go with 4 feet. Why is that? 4 feet's super convenient because you can just slap a piece of plywood onto the side, and a piece of plywood like this is exactly 4 feet when you have it mounted horizontally. So that's easy. That makes life a lot easier than doing, 4 feet, 4 inches or similar. And you have to remember that the wall, 4 feet is from this point. So you go up 4 feet, and what that gets you is 4 feet plus the 1 foot that you already have from the floor of the gypsy wagon. So you're already at 5 feet at the outer edges of the gypsy wagon, and then you have the arch creating even more height in the middle of it. All those things lead to, pretty decent amount of interior room. You don't want to go so high either, because the higher you build, the heavier it gets, the more wind resistance you have on it. We'll start to think about cutting it out, which is super frightening. Anyway, here we go. All right, I've already run into the first issue here. This line to the outside is actually 9 3/4 in my subsequent measurement of it. Therefore, we're not coming out far enough on this line. Hence, we need to move this over 1/4 inch. X this line out. And then the line that I've now made over there is going to have to move over 1/4 inch as well. And this is kind of how it goes. But slow and steady. The only other thing that I've done here, which is pretty intuitive, is cut these top boards. So these are flush with the front of this one. So it effectively is the same length as this board plus 1.5 inches, because this board and that board need to be squared off at the end, which you will see down here. Ooh, right there. So that's where those two come together. So next step for these, this side of it here is going to be, the wall's going to go up here. This piece of it is going to be on the inside of the trailer at that point. So all we really have to do is protect the underside of this, the entire length of the board. So the outer edge, underside, you know, we'll be a little generous with it. But this, of course, here is all going to be internal, and therefore will not need to be sealed. You can see some of the sealant, you know, came around this side too. This is all going to get painted. This is all going to get treated on the inside, so not a big deal. But this potentially, and the underside of it, does need to be worked on. So that's the next step. Same exact thing happened over there. All right, so here's what we have so far. We've got the bottom, this is gonna be real pretty. We've got the bottom section, that's 59 inches. We come up a foot. We come out 9 and whatever, 3/4, come up a foot. We come out 9 3/4, okay? Now, I said something about going 4 feet, so we're gonna go 4 feet up. And we're gonna go 4 feet up. And where that gets us is to a point where this distance from here to here, 6 feet 7 inches, 79 inches. So this is 79. Is that a 79? Yeah, that's kind of a 79. 79 inches. That's how I remember that. So what's left is this arch up here, right? So the gypsy wagon arch. Now, ideally, you can make this arch flattish. You can make it, you know, more pronounced. The trick, though, is that we want this arch, the exact length of this arch. We know that this is 79 inches. We want the length of this arch to be exactly 8 feet. Why is that? Because we're using a 4 by 8 foot sheet of aluminum, and that's got to drape perfectly across there. So there's a formula for this, but you can figure out effectively, you know, measuring an arch like this is tricky, but based on where you place sort of the fulcrum, right? Like if you have a spot here, and then you stay the same distance from that spot and you draw an arch, you can figure out how far it is from A to B based on the, what is that? The, not the radius, the, you know, that other thing. If you have a circle, right? If you were to draw a complete circle, you could figure that out, and you could figure out the distance here. That's what we're gonna do. And then we're going to draw it accordingly after I educate myself on Google, which is a great resource. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. I use it all the time for all sorts of things. So let me figure this out. And then once I figure it out, I'll explain it to you. Here, this is what we needed to do. The green thing is the roof of the gypsy wagon, and the red line is the distance between the walls. So what I needed to know was, what is the radius? And the answer is 45.27. So that's the radius. That's what we're going to utilize here on this sheet of plywood, and that's what's going to get us the arc that we need. So let's go ahead and do that. It'll all become clear why 45.27 is such a key measurement here. Hopefully it's the right measurement, but we're about to find out. The math problem was, okay, how do we create this arc so that it goes exactly from that wall top to this wall top and have that arc be 8 feet. Lots of geometry stuff aside, the answer is 45.2. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go from the top of the arc, and we're gonna know where that is by getting the midpoint of the two walls. 79 inches divided by 2 is whatever it is, and that's going to be a dot right here. We're gonna draw a vertical line. It's gonna be parallel to the midpoint here of the two sheets. And what we're gonna do is we're just gonna draw a straight line down, and then what we're gonna do is we're going to put a nail into the board that's exactly 45.2 inches from that quarter and 45.2 inches from this quarter. And magically, what should happen is when we put a pencil at the end of that piece of string, it should draw a perfect line. So I got 45.25 measurement here on the string. I put a nail dead center into the top of the arc. How did I know where dead center was? Exactly the middle between that wall and that wall. 79 divided by 2 gets you to right here. And then I drew a line parallel basically to the boards. This is 8.5 from the edge of the board. Another dot down there, parallel line. That's where we know we need to put the anchor for the string. It's the center of the circle, if you will. And then the 45.25 is the radius. And we start here, and the string just keeps us honest in terms of keeping that arc going. The string keeps us honest. That's horrible. But you see what's happening here? It's like a big protractor. And it just automatically traces that arc all the way across. There. There's our arc. Now we have the shape. We have the bottom, 59, I believe that was, 9 3/4 out that way, 9 3/4 out this way, up 4 feet, arc, down 4 feet, and that's our shape. We're gonna cut this out. I'm reasonably happy with how this looks. So we've got an interior height of, I'm gonna guesstimate 6.5 feet roughly. So do what we're about to do, which is cut out the arc and cut out the corners. We're gonna use our friend the jigsaw here. I've got a fairly fine metal blade in there. I'll probably be switching to that blade in there, which is kind of a more a rough-edged wood blade. But this will make this pretty easy. So I popped that out of there again. That fits really nice into there as we had wanted it to. And we have the front line here again. What I did is when it was in there, I ran a pencil across the bottom edge here and drew this line. So this is basically everything below this is part of this trailer piece here, and everything above it is what's going to be visible. So the reason I did that is because we're going to paint this black. I could stain it the same way that everything else down here has been stained. I think I'm going to prefer to paint this black, make sure that we seal all this up really good because you don't want water getting in there. So we're going to seal that up. We're going to seal it up with the black paint. May actually go ahead and seal this with the black paint as well. Another place that's going to need to be sealed is this edge here, because that's the front of the trailer. You're gonna have water hitting this. This is an area that is going to be prone to having water come in. It's ultimately going to get covered from the outside, and there's going to be a couple things done with it. But this down here definitely in need of protection. Same thing over here. This. Like a dummy, I cut the corner off, try to glue that back on, And then what we have to do is figure out the location placement of the roofing beams. So we've got those 12-foot 2x4s that we're running the length of the roof. And what we do is we're gonna start dead in the middle. I've still got this line here which symbolizes the middle of the trailer, so we're gonna figure out where that is. We're gonna put one right there. And when I put one right there, what I mean is we're gonna cut out this shape. Trace it, we're gonna cut it out. There's gonna be a cutout right here, and the roofing beam is just gonna slot in there. And then we're gonna use some hurricane ties to connect it properly to here. There's gonna be something connecting it on the front. It's all gonna be safe and secure. And then what needs to happen is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those. So we've got one, and then we've got room for, we got one there. We got room for 3 more on each side, so we got to figure out where they get placed, but it's going to be something like, you know, one here, and then one here on the end. And same thing over here. It's going to be like one here, one here, yeah, one here, and one down on the end. And that's obviously going to be all measured out and equidistant and so forth. Cutouts again, same thing. It's going to be like that. It's going to be like that. And then this one's a little... Anyway, we got our 4-foot wall here. This side's perfectly straight because it's the edge of the plywood. That side over there is, you know, as straight as we could make it. Yeah, that's it. Let's paint this down here, and then we'll worry about the placement of the other things. Once we have that done, once we have the cutouts, then it's really just about mimicking. It's a little bit different back there because you have that rail, that metal rail down at the bottom where you see the stain can back there. So you have to lose like a 1/2 inch at the end, and I don't know, for whatever reason it's a 1/2 inch wider in the back. It's 59.5 versus 59 in the front. So little nuances like that, you know, negate the ability to just simply produce 2 identical pieces like this. Keep in mind too that we're going horizontal with the back. In other words, instead of 2 sheets lying together like this, we're going to lie 2 sheets together like that, and then cut out roughly the same shape. But yeah, the placement of the roofing beams is going to be identical in the back. The roofing pieces run nice and parallel from front to back. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Okay, so now it's time to do the back of the trailer. So I took the other 2 sheets of plywood and I put them up on the sawhorses here. I had to kind of balance it out a little bit. It's a little bit weird because the sheets wouldn't line up. Anyway, I kind of got it lined up. That's pretty tight. I'm just using these clamps to kind of hold it more or less in place. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the initial 2 pieces on top of this. They were vertical. Remember, this one's now horizontal for the back. So they're going to go on top. Yeah. And then we're going to trace the whole thing out and basically duplicate the front to the back. Alrighty, so I put the front back in. You can see the cutouts on it now, sides, all that good stuff. I cut out the back. That is the top section of the back. That is the bottom section of the back. I sort of test fitted it, and it works like a charm back here. Fits right in between the 2 uprights on either side. That's going to get the door cut into it. Nice and flush down there at the bottom. Everything's looking good in terms of the lengths of these boards. This is going to get bolted together shortly. This is the back of that upright seam. Again, we're going to want to seal that really well. Probably run a 2x3 up the back of that. And similarly in the back, the only way that you're going to get the top section up there is if you start to do the framing, right? So this is kind of a bit of a reverse build in that the front and back are sheathed already, if you can call it that. You know, it's pretty thick sheathing. Yeah, the only way that the top section is going to go up there is if I start to frame out the door, and that's typically how I do this. So I decide that the door is going to be, let's say, 24 inches wide. I find out where center is, and I run two corresponding 2x4s up, and those are going to go traverse the bottom board and go into the top board, and then it's basically, you know, you lean the top board onto those 2x4s from the other side, and you put a couple screws in it, and then you have the back wall in place, and then obviously the whole thing gets reinforced. You know, the wall sections are going to go in between here, lateral reinforcement, and then the walls are going to come up. That's all going to be sheathed. So yeah, so it's pretty good. Let me see if I can get in here. In terms of the height, I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'3", and the ceiling's going to be right here. So that's going to mean that we have about a 6'5", 6'6" inch and trip. 6'5", 6'6" inch ceiling up there. So that's what we're looking at. And good space in here. Once those walls go up on the outsides of these outcroppings, it gives you a lot of room in here, you know, for the bed. Kitchen's going to go over here, and then this is going to be a seating area over in this section here. That's how I did it last time. I foresee doing something very similar. The bed is up on a platform, tons of space underneath, battery, electrical, all those things are going to be under here. I may want to do a solar panel for this particular build. They have these flexible solar panels now. Next step is to fasten these boards down here onto the trailer, which ultimately starts to connect the whole thing together. The front as well, that needs to be fastened. This side, obviously. Yeah, and then we're just going to start to piece it all together. The door you can always cut out, right? So it's not an issue. Like I said, I'm going to frame it out in the back. I'm going to attach a top piece. Once the top piece is on, then you can have the rafters start running the length of the trailer. So that'll form the top skeleton, if you will. Yeah, we're going to wrap the top in the aluminum sheets, and away we go. But yeah, this next bit's interesting in the sense that we're going to really adhere everything to the trailer, and that's obviously super important because you don't want this thing flying off of there. We are now ready to, after all the dry fitting that we've done, we're now ready to attach these boards to the sides of the trailer. And how we're going to do that is, initially we're going to go through the inside. We're going to do that with a collection of these bolts. So this is a 3/16, I believe, galvanized. And what this is going to do is it's going to go through this 1.5 inches of wood. This is a 2-inch. Then we're going to hammer this in. The round part's going to go there. And what's left over here on this end, about this much of it, is going to come through the angle iron, the hole that we are going to drill into the angle iron. And then what we do is we're going to use a washer, a split washer, there on here. Put the nut on there and tighten that down. Before we do that, so we've got it clamped in place here. We're going to drill all the holes, like I said. And then we're going to put a nice thick bead of silicone in between this board and this angle iron rail. Flip this thing back up there, attach these. Now, in terms of quantity that we're going to use, have 14 of these, and I've got 4 of these slightly longer ones. So 14 short ones, 4 longer ones. The longer ones are going to be for the front. We're going to use 1, 2, 3, 4 in the front there, because in the front we not only need to go through the 1.5 inch 2x12, we also have to go through the plywood and then come out through the angle iron. So those need to be longer because of that. So those longer ones are for the front, shorter ones are for the sides. That doesn't mean we're going to do 7 holes into this, 7 on the other side, and there's your 14. No, what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 into this board. And this is not an exact science. I mean, they should be spaced roughly the same places, but we're going to go in about here, 1. We're going to go in roughly over here, 2, because you can't go in here because you got the wheel well is going to be in your way. So you want to make sure that you have access to be able to tighten the nut. So 2, and then the third one's going to go right up here, 3. That leaves, if you do the math, that leaves 4 left over for this side. Well, what are those extra 4 for? The extra 4 are for when we move this board back up onto here. And then we're going to do 1 through there, 2, 3, and 4 through the top board. And then you're basically adhering not only this board to the frame, but you're adhering the board that's going on top of it to the frame as well. This creates, you know, a doubly secure and tight bond with the side here. We're going to put some more screws through the top board into this board. Everything here is geared towards this being solid and secure. There's actually one additional step that we'll get to pull the board nice and tight to the outside of the trailer. But we'll get that, because what happens is you can attach this as tight as you want up here. What sometimes happens is there's like a little bit of a gap formed at the bottom edge of this board. It doesn't exactly line up with the trailer framing down there. The board kind of cups in a little bit. So what we want to do is we want to pull that nice and straight. I'll show you how to do that in a second, but first let's drill these 3 holes. Let's silicone this and then attach it. Oh, you also want to make sure that you have it pushed all the way up, that it's up against this piece, and that the plywood is pushed all the way up, because you don't want to be attaching this with a bunch of gaps up here, because ultimately this piece is still going to slot right in there. And so we need to have enough room for that, but no more room than that is what we want. So this is in the right spot right now. I'm going to drill those holes, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, now that we did that, on that side, 3 bolts through the frame, siliconed. I used the gray silicone, by the way, because I figured it would blend. Well, I had it, and I figured it would blend with the staining. Not so much. That's okay. Again, we're going to slice away any excess that came out on the outside there. I also shot a couple pictures of the gap. It's most pronounced in the front. We're going to fix that. But otherwise, that thing is nice. It's the top edge is nice and smooth with the angle iron. And we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. No difference to that, except I got to move some of this stuff away. All right, so other side's getting done. These bolts, these carriage bolts, I don't know if you can see that, but there is a sort of a square shape at the back of this dome piece, right? And what happens is you drill through. I drilled through with a 3/8 drill, by the way, which gives this enough room to get through there, plus get through the angle iron. But it's not too loose. And what you want is, when you slide this thing through there, you want to hammer home the last bit of it, because that seats this square shape into the wood, into the 2x12. And what happens then is when you're tightening down this nut on the other side, it just pulls itself further and further into the wood, and doesn't spin or wiggle out of the way. Now, if you drill too big of a hole, this little square section up here
doesn't get enough chance to sort of grab, and you can get a situation where this thing starts spinning. Not the end of the world. You can always get one with a, you know, with the regular hexagonal, 1, 2, 3, 5, pentagon, hexagonal head, supplemented for that. And then that way you can use a wrench or whatever to tighten this down while holding in a vice grip or similar, while holding this end of it. This is a little hard to grab onto because it's sort of that dome mushroom shape. It doesn't work. Anyway, a little bit of additional information there for you. Let me wrap up this other side, and then we can start thinking about putting the top boards on. Then we're going to put the front and back ply on, and then we have to start thinking about the door in the back. We're already that far. Isn't that amazing? Hopefully nothing that I've done so far has been difficult, other than figuring out that stupid arch at the top of the plywood for the curvature of the roof. Other than that, yeah, again, this has been pretty smooth sailing so far. Let's do the other side, and then we'll figure out what's next. Okay, so clearly it's going to be green. One thing I want to do is get as much coverage as I can on this entire piece of plywood. Get it on the sides, because this paint is going to protect it from water. It's water resistant. So we're going to try to get as much on these sides, especially that middle seam between the two panels. One place I'm not getting any paint is in those cutouts, which is fine, because I probably still have to modify those cutouts a little bit anyway to properly fit the 2x4. So we'll get those cleaned up, and then we'll paint those at the very end, but I am going to go around and hit the edges here. And then obviously it needs another coat too. Incidentally, painting, one of my least favorite activities in the whole world. Don't like it, never have. Next step, yes, is this is going to be where the plywood slides in right here, the front piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to put like some nice thick silicone down here and on the sides. We don't really want to put it all over this thing, because what happens is when this thing slides down, it's just going to sort of smear the whole thing down to the bottom. We don't want that. So it suffices if we get it sort of around the kind of make a U shape with the silicone here. Then we're going to slot those pieces in. Oh, the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to seal up the backs of this thing. Bring you around here. We're going to seal up this area. Probably what we'll do is, the first thing we'll do is we'll pull this piece out. We'll put a nice bit of silicone there. We'll drop this back in, and then we'll push it back up against there. So that'll be sealed. Same thing over there. Then we're going to do what I just described. Then we're going to drop those pieces in. Then, yeah, everything's fair game after that. We can run the bolts through the front. We can pop these pieces onto the sides where they're meant to go. These pieces on the sides where they're meant to go. Yeah, and then we'll do the same thing in the back. We will mount, well, the back clearly is a little bit different. There's no rail basically to slot things into, but the back will attach to back there, and on, this is a stretch.
Anyway, over there, back there, will be the bottom half of the back wall. So that's where we're at. There we go, that's better. Okay, now we're ready to drop those things in there. Because they're so light. Especially this one. So what I'm doing now is I'm placing them upright. I've got the spacing done properly on the bottom. Now you don't want them both to go sort of crooked to the side. So what I'm going to do too is measure from the outer edge to the 2x4. Those measurements have to be the same, and then the distance in between them obviously has to remain the same at 26 inches, not just at the bottom, but also at the top end. So once I have all those measurements correlate, that's how you're gonna know that you got them nice and straight. I'm using those clamps back there to hold them in place temporarily. And then once they're in the position I want them to be in, I'll mark them one more time. And then I'll send a couple screws through from the other side just to lock them into place. All right, I think that's about got it. You saw me going back and forth, back and forth. It's weird sometimes, you know, you move one side and it seems like the other, like how can the other side be off by a quarter inch? Sometimes it's just like a little bit of a twist of the thing, but just take your time with it. You know, keep playing around with it until everything matches up. So I'm 23 in from each side till I hit a 2x4. And there's 26 inches between the 2x4s up top. There's 26 inches between the 2x4s at the bottom. That's pretty much it. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to send a screw through the part that I can reach over the top of the wall. And then I'm gonna lean something against the bottom piece so that it doesn't move out of the way. Those are both in. It's a little bit hard on that second one to get the screw in. I don't know if you saw it, but it came out on the bottom inside of the 2x4. That's fine because that's going to get cut out anyway for the door. I went over another inch or two. Because when you're standing on the other side of that wall, you just kind of look up and see where that top screw is, and then you try to figure out where the bottom one goes. It's a little dicey. You get the first two in, you're in good shape. Those will definitely hold, and now what we can do is we have those 2x4s now to place the top piece up there.